Nobody wakes up one day and thinks, oh, I'm just going to write a book today. I think we carry the idea with us for a long time, and it gets to a point where it's just saying, right, please just let me out of your head now and onto paper.
Hello and welcome to the Driven Female Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, award-winning business coach, value whisperer, and founder of the Dream Clients Blueprint, your step-by-step guide to communicating your true value with confidence and attracting more of your perfect fit clients so you can enjoy the income, impact, and lifestyle you desire. And if right now you are starting to think about exactly how you'll do that next year, how you will build and grow your business, then do go back and listen to the planisodes. I was considering reworking those episodes for this year, but I listened back to them and it's all there ready for you. The planisodes are a series of mini episodes from episode 136 to 143 of this podcast. So you can go back and find step-by-step guidance to set your goals and overcome any mindset blocks standing between you and success, so you can really set yourself up for success in 2024. There is also a free downloadable worksheet to help you map out your goals and kickstart your year. On this show, each week, I bring you practical, tried and tested advice and techniques through my own experience and those of other successful women in business. Our goal is to help you dream bigger and confidently achieve more in your business and in life. Today, I'm speaking with Steph Caswell in what will be the last interview of 2023. I will be here, however, over Christmas and the New Year with a series of mini-sodes exploring some of the biggest lessons I've personally learned over the last 15 years in business and how you can use them to have a brilliant 2024. I will also be introducing you to some big changes happening in 2024, including a rebrand of this very podcast. But don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, but just renaming and refocusing the show to give you even more value and support in your business. So watch out for those episodes. They will explain everything. Meantime, if you've been carrying a book around in your head for a while now, you are going to love today's show. I'm speaking with Steph Caswell, an author, writing coach, and developmental author, about what it really takes to get your knowledge and expertise into an unforgettable book that enhances your profile and builds your business. As well as coaching others, Steph has written 6 books, the latest of which was a finalist in the 2023 Business Book Awards, and she is the host of Creating Happy Writers podcast. So she knows a thing or two about what it takes to get your book idea structured, written, and published. So exciting things to come. Let's welcome Steph. So hi, Steph. It's great to have you with us on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, and I love the title of your book, and we're going to dive into everything about what it takes to publish a book and have that courage to get your thought leadership out there. But before we dive into all of that, I'd love it if you could share your story, because I know you started out as a teacher. How did you become a book coach and publish your own book?
Good question. I started out, teaching in 2004, and I made my way all the way up to being a deputy head teacher in sort of 2011, and really enjoyed my job. I love teaching. I still do love teaching, but the stress of the job unfortunately got to me in about 2014, 2015. And I was signed off with stress and anxiety. And it was an opportunity for me to really evaluate what I wanted to do with my life. And by that point, I had published 1 book, and I was really enjoying the process of writing and publishing. And I thought to myself, if I could do anything, what would I want to do? And I decided that writing books was that thing. So I wrote a couple more while I was still teaching. And again, just really stamped for me how much I loved it. And so decided actually I didn't want to have to feel the way I was feeling about my job anymore. And I slowly came away from teaching, went down to part-time. I stopped being a deputy, and then eventually left and was doing some tutoring for a little while, all the while, writing and building up my experience of that. And about 3 years ago, coming up to 3 years ago, I started full-time writing, doing books, yes, but also doing some writing for other people. So things like copywriting, to just start to really embrace the book and the writing journey. So that's how I got here in a very quick stop way.
Yeah, I suspect it was quite abridged because you're like, yeah, I just wrote a couple of books. I was like,
Yeah.
I actually didn't just write a couple of books. What was it like that early part of your journey where you were writing books? Was it something that was natural and obvious to you, or did you have to spend some time learning the skills, making mistakes? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, absolutely. It's all about the mistakes, isn't it? And what we learn from them. But before I wrote the books that I've written so far, I'd spent quite a lot of time writing for children, just, playing around with novel writing and really enjoyed that. So I knew that I loved writing. I just hadn't really thought about writing nonfiction or business books. It was predominantly children's books that I was really interested in. And so I knew it wasn't something that I knew as a kid. It's not like I thought, well, gosh, when I'm older, I want to be an author. That wasn't definitely not the case. But it was something that, like I say, through that experience of novel writing, I started to realize that I did really enjoy it. And then when I was a deputy, I was asked continually by different people, newly qualified teachers at that stage, how to manage behavior, how to manage parents, how to understand special educational needs, all these sorts of things that I was talking to them about. And the one that stuck out the most was behavior management, because lots of people who are in the early stages of teaching can struggle with that, because it is a big thing to try and manage a class of 30. And I thought to myself, well, I keep saying the same things to people over and over again and keep giving them the same strategies. And I thought, you know what, I wonder whether I could write a book about it. And it came really from that kind of curious question, really, of, is it something I could do? Would anyone want to read it? And I started writing it, kept failing miserably because I I was trying to write and edit at the same time, which is a terrible decision. And so I just kept starting and getting to the same point and then getting absolutely sick and tired of the writing process, thinking, why can't I make it to the end? Eventually, through, trying to learn about the craft of writing, I realized that I should stop editing at the same time. And I surprisingly finished my book quite quickly, and then was able to then obviously go back and do the editing stuff. And it was then that I thought, actually, I really enjoyed that process. And for me, it seemed quite a logical one, because I was teaching a framework to people that were reading the book. And the framework was this thing that I'd created to help me remember the most pertinent points of behavior management. So it seemed quite a simple structure, really. And then I thought to myself, well, I've done one book. So I thought I'd let me do another, and then made it a trilogy of books around how to do various aspects of the teaching in your early stages. So it kind of came out of just a curious thought whether I could do it, and then realized I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting, isn't it? How sometimes we don't realize there's so many skills and ideas and opportunities that we've never pursued because they've just never perhaps been on our radar before. I remember quite a few years ago, I had like a little product business and I had to sell live at Christmas markets, for example. And I was terrified. And then I went, I was like, I really love this.
Yeah.
It was, I never thought I would enjoy it. So now I'm just try and embrace as many different opportunities and see, well, what else do I love doing? And it's really great when you stumble across something like that you enjoy and you're good at, and it can make a difference as well, because I'm sure that trilogy you've put together is making a huge difference for teachers.
Yeah, I hope so. But I think you're right also around finding out what you enjoy through experiences. But I think I've also realized I find out what I don't enjoy doing. And that's also just as valuable, because for me, the dream is just to write books and to help authors. That's all I want to be doing for the rest of my life. Writing books for sure is the big kind of goal. And the more I do things, actually, I think, oh, I thought I'd enjoy this. And then I try it and I think, no, that's not quite right for me. I think that's just helping me refine the journey ahead even more.
Mm, yeah. So do you think that anyone can be an author? Because there's that saying, isn't it? Like everyone has a book in them, but very few people actually go ahead and write a book. Do you think that's because they don't have the skills, or is there something else that stops them? That's probably about three questions in one there.
Mm. I get asked this question the most, is can anybody write a book? And the truth is, I think that the majority, if not everyone, can write a book, whether that is completely them writing it or whether it's them getting a ghostwriter, whether it's them working with somebody like me, you know, a coach who can help them to structure it and put it together. Some people, I mean, Jamie Oliver did a great thing recently where he talked about the fact that he's dyslexic and he dictates his books because he doesn't have the confidence to write them down physically, so he dictates them. And you know, he's written however many you know books now over the last few years, and he dictates them all. And I think that's really encouraging for people who maybe feel that there is a barrier there when it comes to being able to write per se, you know, that kind of conventional idea of writing and sitting down with your laptop or your notebook and physically doing it. I think that's helped people a lot to realize that there are so many avenues now that just weren't available as easily 20 years ago. So I think, yes, most people can write a book, whether that is, like I say, completely them or whether they're getting help with it, I think is beside the point. If you have a message, if you have something, a story you want to tell, I think it's really important that if you want to tell it, that you explore all the options and get all the support you need to be able to do that. And a good coach, a good editor will be able to tell you the stuff that you should keep and maybe the stuff that isn't as relevant. So there is that as well. There's those difficult conversations that I sometimes have to have with authors with, you know, is this absolutely relevant for the reader to know? Because we sometimes fall into the trap of wanting to showcase everything that we know and forget about the reader and actually what it is they need to know, rather than what we want to tell them. So there is that journey that you have to go on as a writer. And in novel writing, it's called killing your darlings, where you have these characters or this scene that you particularly love, and actually it just isn't fit for purpose, so you have to get rid of it, and it's painful. And it's the same when you're writing a business book. You sometimes have to take out chapters or sections or stories that you thought you would include, and actually they're not relevant and you have to get rid of them. But it's part of the process and you have to be open-minded.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it can be the opposite way as well. So I know when I was writing my book, I had a mentor slash editor. I think editors kind of do everything, don't they? But she was great in saying, well, yeah, this is great information, but it doesn't feel like it's your information. Like, I want to know, why did you discover this? And really helped me bring more of my personality into the book. So it made it more readable and relatable as people were going through. So that made a big difference as well. So if you think, I've got an idea for a book, is there any advice you'd give to anyone who's thinking, yeah, I want to do this, I want to get started?
Yeah, I think it's about being honest with yourself for starters. You know, sometimes we have an idea for a book, and then when we come to map it out or plan it, we realize maybe it's not quite a book, and maybe it's, you know, a smaller ebook that you put together for your website, or, you know, it's a longer blog post. And I think that's just about having that ability to really focus and say, okay, I'd love to write this particular book, but actually, is there a whole book in there? But I would say most of the time, for most people, myself included, it is a whole book. It's just about trying to, particularly, I think a lot of people have the book they want to write carrying around with them in their heads. I always say to people, nobody wakes up one day and thinks, oh, I'm just going to write a book today. I think we carry the idea with us for a long time. And I know that the next nonfiction book that I write has been in my head for about a year. And it gets to a point where, for me, it's just saying, right, please just let me out of your head now and onto paper. And I feel like when you're in that position, when you've had this idea going around for months, maybe years, you need to just allow everything that you're holding onto in your head, which will probably be quite a lot of things, out onto paper. And what I tend to do is I just put everything that's in my head down on paper, which then frees up more space for me to then think, you know, wider about the topics I want to cover. But the great thing is that by doing that, I tend to write everything down in a spider diagram of ideas, and I leave it for maybe a week or 2 weeks, and I just let my brain do the work subconsciously. So it might be when I'm walking the dog or brushing my teeth or something very irrelevant to writing, that all of a sudden I'll have something that comes to me, and it will sort of be like, oh, that's something I want to add to that chapter, and I'll just go down and write it down on the sheet. Or I haven't, you know, on my phone I have my notes app, just where when I'm walking the dog and I'm like, oh no, I've just thought of that, and I quickly just pop it down there and then pop it onto the sheet. feet when I get home. And I just over time, over the week or the 2 weeks, you just add to it and add to it and add to it. And I think it's a great way of just showing that you've got the ideas. It's now just a case of pulling them together into some sort of structure, but allowing yourself that creative time and space to let your brain do what it does best, subconsciously, to work on things while you're sleeping and while you're doing other things, and capture those as much as possible.
I love that idea that you kind of just get everything out of your head, have some kind of rough structure. These are the kind of themes that I want to cover, and then give yourself that space for your brain to work when it's naturally feeling creative and inventive. Like you said, it's rarely when we're actually sat at the computer. I love that you have that space and give yourself the time to pull that together. I kind of feel that once you do that, you have your rough outline, you've expanded on the themes, you thought what's important to include here, then it's probably just a case of filling in the gaps. Is it that easy?
It is, if you put an outline together. So I work with authors predominantly on that part of their writing, because they'll often come to me and they'll have this idea and they've got a few things jotted down. Quite often they'll say, can I send you what I've thought of already? So it's often a work in progress. And what we do then is look together at, how can this be structured in a way that's most helpful to the reader? I work with a lot of women who have podcasts, who have written extensive blogs over years. And I always encourage people to look back at the content they've already produced and think to themselves, what could I take from all the work I've done over the last, maybe up to 5 years, that is actually still applicable? Because a lot of the stuff we produce as entrepreneurs is evergreen, and we're able to then go and dig into that and think, okay, I'm not necessarily going to publish that blog post as a chapter because it's a few years old and it needs tightening up, but what it does do is takes away the blank page. So I will always encourage people, right, let's look back over what you've already got and let's see what we can already start filling in, and then we look at chapters maybe that haven't got that content, and we start to map out some of the subheadings and what are the things we definitely want to say in this. And by doing that, when you write your first draft, you're never without some sort of prompt to know what to do, because people will often sit down to write if they haven't got a structure, and they start off well. They'll start the first few chapters and they're very motivated, and then I'll have people who'll contact me and say, I'm halfway through, I hate this, I don't want to look at this manuscript ever again. But they know deep down in their hearts that they want to write this book, but they've got to a point where without a structure, they're beginning to panic and to worry and to have lost direction. So again, I'll try and work with them to say, right, let's pull it all together into something now that you can then use. Every time you sit down, you'll look at your plan and you'll know, right, okay, today in this chapter, I'm going to be writing about this, and then off you go. And it takes away the blank page and the overwhelm.
Yeah, I love that, breaking it down into smaller pieces. I always find that so helpful. Anytime I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's like, hold on a minute, how can I just break this down a bit smaller? And then, yeah, it's easy.
Yeah,
fantastic advice. And your book is titled Dare to Write. What do you think holds people back? We were talking earlier about this idea of, well, who am I to say this? Or will anyone actually read this book? Are there any typical fears that you see standing in people's way that we can already say, that's a load of rubbish, just just get on with it?
A lot of things that hold people back, for sure. And the whole narrative around what we tell ourselves, particularly as female authors, around, who am I to say this? What will people think if I write a book? Why would people want to listen to what I have to say? And I had a call with a fantastic woman the other day who's built a business over the last 10 years, and she's helped thousands of women go back to work after having children. And she sort of telling me this brilliant story about her journey and what she's done and how her business has helped all these women. And then she said right at the end, but I don't suppose anyone will really care about that, will they? And I thought, yes, they will. Like, I've just been absolutely enthralled listening to you. Of course, people are going to want to hear your story. And of course, they're going to want to learn from you because you've had such an amazing amount of success, but also because you're doing something so worthwhile. And I think sometimes we forget how far we've come. We forget all the incredible things we've done over the years. And we just think to ourselves, oh, well, surely everyone's just doing that, right? And actually, no, of course they're not. And that sort of self-doubt, that imposter syndrome is a big one for women who I work with, because I'm just trying to say to them, your message is valid. It's something that people want to hear. And frankly, over the last however many years in the business book space, it's been dominated by men. And it's time for the women to get their voices heard. So I'm all for championing female voice and getting people sharing their expertise.
Yeah. I used to do a lot of writing in corporate and writing for corporate magazines. So I had to go and sit with a lot of my colleagues and just ask them, well, what do you do in your spare time? Or what are you doing here? That's this project that you're working on? And so often they were like, oh, well, no one wants to read about that. It's not very interesting. And then they go and tell you this incredible story. It's like, yeah. And I purposely made a point of not understanding too much about the different departments, what people did, so that when they told me, I could get really excited about that. I could ask some questions as someone who doesn't know, when I was really filling in the details. And it was always fascinating. I used to work in a company where people would design oil rigs, and they just thought that was the most boring thing. I was like, oh my gosh, that's fascinating to understand. Like, one person calculates the likelihood of each nut and bolt breaking on an oil rig. And you think, what? That's incredible that it comes down to that each nut and bolt doesn't have the same pressure. I mean, this is silly little things that for them was nothing, but I just thought, I'd never thought about that before.
No,
Really interesting.
Oh my gosh, no. It's probably good, actually. We haven't thought about whether the nuts and bolts hold an oil rig together. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And just so many of these little things that are just really interesting. And we're always interested in little facts and behind the scenes things and how the world works. And we only have our own experiences to go by. So we love learning from other people. So yeah. So is there anything else that we can encourage anyone listening who has that story going on in their mind that, oh, I'm not good enough, no one's going to read this? Is there any process or anything that they can do to challenge that thinking?
Oh, 100%. So what I will say to people, first and foremost, is if you are having that voice in your head that's telling you, I always say to people, go and find some testimonials, go and find some things that people have said about what you've done for them, print them off and stick them up in your writing space, because I think we can forget all those wonderful comments people have made over time, or whether we've had testimonials that are on our website that maybe we haven't looked at for ages, or anything like that, anything where you've got positive feedback about what you're trying to do and how you help people. Print them out, stick them up, and just keep reminding yourself that write for one person. That's the danger. I think we think, oh, well, everyone's going to read my book. And as lovely as that would be, it's obviously impossible for everyone to read your book. So just write for one person and just keep focusing on them. And, even if it's a client you've had before who left you a brilliant review and they're now off being very successful in whatever they're doing, write for them and think, okay, where were they at the beginning and how did I help them? And that's then proof, isn't it, that you do know what you're doing and you do have the expertise, and you've got to just keep motivating yourself. And the other option is to have a writing buddy who's maybe either on a similar journey to you, or just somebody who's really good at making you feel good. And you can say to them, listen, can I just share with you when I've reached a particular word count, or if I sit down today and write, can I just tell you that I've done this today? And they can give you a bit of positive feedback. It's just trying all these different ways to motivate yourself throughout the process and to keep all those wonderful things you've done at the forefront of your mind.
Brilliant advice. And Claire Yosa was on the show quite some months ago now talking about imposter syndrome. And she made the point that if you feel you have imposter syndrome, you are not an imposter, because a real imposter would never think that.
Such a good point.
Yeah. So if you are suffering with imposter syndrome, go back and listen to that episode. She gave some great advice on that one as well. So what are the benefits these days of writing a book? Does it help your business in some way?
It helps in so many ways. And that's the thing that I get the most joy out of when I finish working with a client. And it's something people will often say to me, oh, this has happened for me off the back of writing my book, and it's nothing that they could ever have imagined. And that's what I love the most. Only today I was sharing a post on my Instagram from a client who basically had said to me, Steph, this has absolutely changed everything for me, this book. And she had started talking to all these different organizations who got in touch with her off the back of it. She's going to be doing some consulting work with them. She's got people asking her to run workshops. And the same thing happened to me with my first book for teachers. I had schools reaching out to me and saying, could you come in and teach the framework? I had a national teaching magazine get in touch, say, would you write regularly for us? So it's all of these things that we think it's the book, we think it's the thing that comes at the end that's on our bookshelf. And yes, of course, that is an important thing. You can sell copies of that. But to be frank, you aren't going to be this incredibly multi-million-dollar selling author. It's very unlikely. And so for me, a book is actually just a tool to grow your business in all the other ways. So whether that's charging more because you've taken yourself to that next level of expertise, or it could be that you are offered consulting gigs, or you get to go and do paid talks now rather than doing them for free, or you are working and maybe you do a group program that runs alongside your book. All these things that are available to you that aren't directly the book itself, but actually are coming off the back of writing it. And that's what's exciting for me, to see these people that I've worked with doing all sorts of brilliant things just because they decided to write their book and publish it.
Yeah, I've certainly had that experience myself as well. My book was on networking, but it's really about marketing and personal branding. So it has opened all sorts of opportunities, and it automatically gives you a certain amount of authority because you've actually put your ideas in a book and it's been published and it's on a shelf. And it feels good.
Yeah, it does feel good. It feels amazing. It feels amazing. And what I think I love the most is when people will tag me in something that they're reading it and it's given them some sort of, light bulb moment where they're now going to go off and either write their book, or they've decided actually they are going to hit publish on something maybe they've been sitting on for a little while. And that's what writing a book should be about. It should be about the reader. It should be about the transformation that you can give them through reading your book. And like I say, it's such a thrill when people tag me and say, oh, I'm reading this at the moment, I'm loving it, it's giving me ideas. And I just think, yes, that's why I wrote it. I'm writing it to help you. I'm not writing it for me to make money off the back of it, so to speak. All of those, obviously that's a brilliant side thing of it, but for me primarily it's just how can I help people, and if you go in with that attitude, I think it offers so many possibilities.
Yeah, and I think when you write from the heart, that comes across, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we talked earlier that there's lots of options when it comes to writing your book. Once you have a plan and a structure, the actual writing, you can speak it, you can write it, you can have someone else write it or help you with that process. Once you have the book, there's still lots of options when it comes to publishing a book, self-publishing, like going to a traditional publishing house or through an agency, or there's a wide spectrum there. Does it matter which way you publish a book? Do you have any advice as to how to make that decision?
Mm-hmm. Again, a very common question for people that I talk to, either who are thinking about it or who are actively writing. We are, living in an age where, it's the best time ever if you're an author, because you have all these options that just weren't around. But it is a personal preference. And I always encourage people to go with what their heart wants, because there's nothing worse than doing a particular route and then realizing, actually, I wish I'd done the other one that I felt really more aligned with. So you have to do what feels right for you. And that's different for everybody. And everyone's goals are different. Everyone's outcomes from writing are going to be different. There are obviously pros and cons to all the options. Traditional publishing, great, you're in a bookshop, you've got that kudos of being published by a publishing house. People can see that you have been chosen to be published, which is great and can do wonders for you. However, you've got the other side of it, which is the length of time. Publishing is not a quick industry, it's snail pace. So you may have your book commissioned and then 2 years later it's finally on the shelf. So it's not quick and it's not brilliantly paid, as we touched on earlier. It's something that is sadly still a sort of not a brilliant income for people. So I think some recent research that have been put together has come out, and they're saying that the average author will only earn £10,500 a year or something. So, and these are people who are writing full time, if you like. So it's not something that is lucrative in that respect. But having said that, if you self-publish, you're more likely to get better royalties. You can write more, you can write a series of books, and you can release them very quickly, one after the other. You're not waiting on other people to tell you when to publish. You can just publish when you like. So there's that autonomy side of self-publishing, which I love. And I think that a lot of business owners see the value of is actually, I just want to take control of this situation. And it's a great way of getting yourself out there nice and quickly. And you still have to make your book professional. I'm always saying to people, it's representing you, it's representing your business, your brand. Therefore, you want it to be the best representation of you as possible. So do work with an editor, do work with cover designers, make it look so that if anyone picked it up, they wouldn't know whether it was self-published or traditionally published. You want it to be a really good quality thing that you're putting out there. So you do have that side of it to think about. It is an investment of finance to do it yourself. It's one of those things that you've got to weigh up what feels right for you.
Yeah, great advice to help people start thinking what could be the right option for them as well. And one thing that I learned when I co-published my very first book quite a few years ago was that if you self-publish, you can still sell that book to a publishing house. If they see it's popular, then they might want it as part of their portfolio anyway. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one or the other. One could lead to the other.
Yeah. And they're always looking, they are always looking. I know a few authors who have been, like you said, picked up off the back of being self-publishing, and then publishing houses become interested because of how well it's selling. And I went to the self-publishing show this year, which was in London in May, and it was really interesting to hear authors who have had that sort of experience where they are publishing themselves and then are being given publishing deals for maybe another series or a different book that the publisher thinks, actually, you obviously know what you're doing, you know how to write. And there was a gentleman on the panel who said that his publisher had basically asked him for marketing and sales advice because he had obviously nailed it as an independent author, as a self-publisher, and they were like, well, we want to know what you're doing to do it so well. So there are conversations to be had with publishing houses if you end up making a success of self-publishing, for sure. But I do know there are other authors who cling on to their self-published books because they want to regain control over them, but they may then get something else that they write for a publishing house. So there is that hybrid model where you might self-publish some of yours and traditionally publish others. So there's all sorts of options. It's fantastic. As I said, it's a great time to be an author, and it's just about keeping an open mind and going with what feels right for you.
Exactly. You just never know where it's going to take you. So just dive in and see what happens.
Absolutely.
Steph, you've shared so much great information and really helped us see what it takes to start the process of writing a book, and really what that whole process looks like, and how we can stop telling ourselves that we're not good enough or whatever and actually get on with that process. Is there anything you feel that we haven't touched on that people need to know in order to get their knowledge out there in the book?
I think my only other piece of advice would be, don't think to yourself that you have to spend hours per day writing. If you have that time to spend on writing, great. But, as business owners, it's highly unlikely that you're going to be able to spend hours a day writing. And I think that's what can put some people off. They think, I've got to be able to spend hours on this, and I just don't have that time. And I write all my books in a way that often shocks people, because they'll say, are you sure? And I'll say, absolutely. I write my books just writing in half an hour a day. I started that because when I was still a full-time deputy, I had 2 small children. I did not have the time to spend hours writing. So I thought, for me, the compound effect of this idea of so little and often and consistently done is better than trying to sit for 3 hours and writing, because with the best will in the world, there's always other things in business that you can be doing in 3 hours. And I think that's what I try to say to people. If you want to write a book, please don't let time be something that puts you off. If you can spend half an hour writing, but you do that every single day, your book will come together far quicker than you can possibly imagine. So as much as A Cabin in the Woods with deer going past the window and hours sitting in a chair and mulling over your manuscript sounds wonderful. In reality, it's not necessary. So you don't need to take yourself away for a week and write. You don't need to do that. You just need to sit your bum in the chair half an hour every day, and you'll be surprised.
Yeah, brilliant advice. And I have actually a local friend here, and she wrote 6 books in a year. And she wrote them, it was like 15 minutes on her way to work on the tram, 15 minutes on the way back. And then every Sunday she sat down for an hour before she went to church and just ratified all of that information, kind of tidied it up. And that was it, 6 books in a year. I was like, wow. But it was just like half an hour a day divided into 15 minutes. So
yeah, absolutely. I think that is the key. And that is my big philosophy is around consistency in small amounts. You'll write your book far quicker, I think, than if you try and spend 3 hours every Saturday trying to do it, because 3 hours, and I'm a writer by profession, I could not sit for 3 hours and write. I think I'd probably cry. So it's about just trying to think to yourself, what's manageable for me? And even if half an hour feels too much, then like your friend, even if it's 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, or whatever works, just try and get yourself writing every day for as long as you can, but don't think it has to be hours and hours, because it really doesn't.
Yeah, brilliant advice. And I always tell my clients, if it works for you, it works.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I know you've got a free tool as well, and I'll link people to that in the show notes. 5 ways to plan your best-selling book in your niche. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's designed for people right at the beginning of their journey who've got a kernel of an idea for a book, and they just want some help to map out those thoughts that they've got. So it looks at the sort of the 5 W's of writing, which is the who, so who are you writing for? The what, as in what are you going to be writing about? The why, as in why are you writing this particular book, and why is it going to help your business? The when, so when are you going to publish? Giving yourself a deadline, because that always helps, particularly if you don't have a traditional publisher breathing down your neck. And the where, as in, so where are you going to publish? Are you going to self-publish, traditionally publish? Is it going to be something that's exclusive to your website? Things like that. All of those things are worth thinking about right at the start, particularly about the when, because if you can think to yourself, right, if you're self-publishing, I know I want this book out by X date, then you can start working backwards and thinking, right, so I know I need to start planning and writing now, and you can give yourself that deadline that is more, what traditional authors would have is, the editor wants it on this date, so you have to get it to them. If you don't have that, you have to set that date yourself.
Brilliant. And I was just talking with our clients earlier about the wonder of the pressure of deadlines. So one of my clients was on the podcast today, and she's like, oh, it made sure that I actually finished my website update that I've been procrastinating over, because people might visit it after being on the show. So yeah, having that deadline always does wonders, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it really helps me every time.
Steph, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing just so much wisdom with us. I'm looking forward to seeing how many of our audience start to write their book. And if you are out there listening, you start writing a book, do let us know and tag in myself and Steph so we can cheer you on along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about that encouragement and that motivation. So you got to keep going. And even when it feels hard, and it will feel hard, I think it's about coming up with strategies that you use if and when things have been hard before. What do you do when things are hard? And use those strategies that work to get you through, and you will get through it, I promise.
Yeah. As Glennon Doyle says, we can do hard things.
We can.
Great. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. I can't wait to hear all about the books you are going to start writing. Come and join the discussion in the Dream Clients Club group on school.com, that's school with a K. And if you enjoyed the show, then please do leave a review and share this episode with your network and business besties. And remember, if you're starting to think about planning your business success for 2024, I've got your back. Go back and listen to episodes 136 through to 143 of the show, and listen to the 8 short planisodes I've recorded for you. You'll find step-by-step guidance to set your goals and overcome any mindset blocks that stand in between you and success. You can also download a handy free worksheet to help you. Just search planisodes on my website on the podcast page to find all the planisodes on one page there, along with a link to the free worksheet to support you. You can also find it by searching on Google. I've tried it and it came up that way too. And while this has been the last interview episode, For 2023, I will be back, as I mentioned, between Christmas and the New Year with a series of mini-sodes sharing my insights and lessons from the last 15 years in business and a sneak preview of the big changes on the horizon. So keep an eye out, or maybe that should be an ear out for those. Meantime, I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas.